Hey everybody, Adrian here, one of the co-hosts of Sidebar Forever, the new version of the former Sidebar Pop Culture podcast. Every month, Sidebar Forever posts brand new episodes discussing and examining pop culture and art-related topics. However, as a bonus and a reminder to listeners who followed us in our previous incarnation, we're representing some of our vintage back episodes. Many of our classic interviews and roundtables will once again be available in our podcast feed. So, please enjoy this back episode from the Barchives, and don't forget to subscribe to Sidebar Forever on sidebarforever.com, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcast. And hey, follow us on our socials, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you don't miss a single new episode of Sidebar Forever.
Today's interview is with, again, Lois van Baarle. She was great, and she's a tremendously talented artist, very gifted, an animator, an illustrator. I presume maybe some comics might be in her future at some point, I would guess.
Well, if they can, if the dollar can be worth something for a change.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, for American comics, for sure.
Yeah, that might tickle her fancy.
Yeah.
So.
Lois is from the Netherlands, and she's lived all over the world in many, many different places. What else about Lois?
She started out self-taught like a lot of folks did. She ended up graduating at Utrecht.
Utrecht
School of Arts.
Utrecht School of the Arts. Yeah.
Animation appears to be her primary pursuit, but she's also an illustrator. In fact, she considers herself to, in fact, be more of an illustrator than an animator.
Right.
She has several videos you can look at on YouTube and Vimeo, including her 2010 demo reel.
And the 2009 one, and Trichrome Blue, I think, too.
Right. So.
And you can find her online at loish.net, and that's loish.net. But she also has a DeviantArt page, and she's very, very popular there. And she's not only talented and skillful at her chosen profession, but she was a super cool person, too. We had a good time chatting with her, and we hope everybody enjoys listening to our conversation with Lois van Baarle. So let's get right to it, guys.
Yep.
Let's start with some background and a little bio information on you. I know you mentioned quite a bit in your facts section on your site, but fans of yours particularly will probably really enjoy hearing you talk about yourself and where you came from artistically in your own words. So if we can, where did you grow up, and what are your earliest memories of drawing and all that sort of thing?
Well, I was born in Holland in the Netherlands, and when I turned 4, my dad got a job with the Dutch embassy, which required our family to move every 3 or 4 years. So when I was 4 years old, I lived in Virginia in the United States. And then after 4 years, we went to Jakarta, Indonesia. And then after 3 years to Paris, France, and then to Brussels. And then I moved back to Holland.
Okay.
So I've sort of grown up in a combination of different places. I can't say there's one specific place where I really grew up because I've never lived anywhere longer than 4 years.
Okay.
And my earliest memories of drawing were probably in America in kindergarten, where I drew like all the time. And people always gave me compliments and said I was very good, which really encouraged me to just keep doing it and to think that I was good and practice a lot. And I'm pretty sure that that's what led to me having confidence in myself and drawing all the time. So, yeah.
You mentioned all the traveling. Now, how did that affect you as far as your social life and your social skills? Because we oftentimes talk to kids who are the children of people who work in the military or who are involved in the military, and they talk about moving a lot and having to make friends, very easily. Was that your situation or your case, or? Yeah,
well, what happens is that you're able to make friends quite quickly, because I always had a best friend in each place that I lived, and I always got these best friends within the first few weeks of moving to a new place. But it also gives you the ability to move on very quickly, because I never had friends for very long, and after a while you keep in touch, but you don't really stay friends, you just stay in contact somehow. So I get to know, like, I'm pretty used to getting to know new people quite quickly, but also not being like as committed as other people who live in one place to a friendship.
Ah, right. I can imagine the making friends and also the giving up friends kind of coming pretty
Yeah.
easily to you. You know, having moved so frequently.
Yeah.
Did you always plan on coming back to the Netherlands? Because I know you went to school in Belgium. Is it pronounced Ghent?
Hence, actually, but just say Ghent.
Hint. Well, no. I want to be correct. Hint.
That's the sound that most Americans can't make when they speak Dutch. The sound.
Okay.
It sounds a lot like it's just an unattractive sound to many Americans.
It's kind of almost like a Yiddish pronunciation. It seems
Yeah, it is. Actually, it's very similar. Yeah.
Okay. Hint.
Hence.
But you went to school there for a while, and then you eventually ended up in Utrecht, going to the School of the Arts.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of your time in Utrecht, now how was that for you? Because one of the things I noticed in an interview that you mentioned going to the school and learning quite a bit, but at the same time, you still felt like most of your raw drawing skill was kind of, self-taught even still. Like you almost implied that you didn't really learn how to draw while you were there. You learned other things, but not about just drawing and illustration. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't really know why it's that way here in Holland, but there's a very different philosophy towards education. They're much less technical here, and especially in art schools, have the idea that you should be encouraged to just draw and do your own ideas and find your own way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And in terms of technique, you just learn very little. Even in terms of animation technique, I learned very little at my school. Mm-hmm. I learned more about just working with deadlines, how to manage projects, and actually most of it came out of just doing the projects and not necessarily getting lessons on how to do it.
Okay.
It's very, very open-minded and very free here. So, I get a lot of my artistic inspiration from the internet. It sounds kind of lame, but it really is true. Like, a lot of people have like books and all these things, but I really just became very inspired by other artwork when I started drawing online and posting my work in art communities. Mm-hmm. And I found that there were so many talented artists just actively posting stuff on the web, and that's where I find almost all of my inspiration, actually.
Right. Well, I can see that now, especially. I mean, that's how we found you, after all. So
it's true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's always, because like a lot of people like look down on DeviantArt. When I tell people that I'm on DeviantArt, they're like, "Oh, right, that website with all of the, stuff. Bad art." Right. But the thing is, there are a lot of extremely talented people there, and you get a sort of different insight into their work because they are, usually updating blogs and showing the process and giving more explanation and giving you the ability to interact with them, and that's been the most inspiring thing for me.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think DeviantArt has changed considerably. It used to be like more of what we said before, as far as it not being not so great or whatever. But now it's definitely changed in a dramatic upswing over the past few years, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean there's still a lot of like the problem with DeviantArt is that it doesn't really have a selection process for anything that's posted. So there's a lot of bad stuff there, but there's also so many professionals. I mean, it's just amazing that Chris Sanders is on there is already so shocked. Like someone who is such a professional and just posting their work on that site is amazing.
Two artists that we follow have been on DeviantArt. One's been on for forever, and that's Sean Cheeks Galloway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know him.
He's a friend of the show, and he told us he said he's going to be on DeviantArt until they slam the doors and make him get out, because he feels like it's been so integral to his development and his sense of community, I guess, as an individual, in the artistic community. But you've mentioned in other places too about the influence of Black Cat on you. When did you first discover her work, and what is it about her stuff that kind of appeals to you, Lois?
Oh, I discovered her work. I used to draw on Okaki boards. They're like these special kinds of like online forum type things where you can post little doodles that you make in an applet that's linked to the site. Mm-hmm. And there was a website that had those drawings, and it was French and had a lot of very good French artists posting there, and she was one of the artists. Mm-hmm. And I was just like amazed by her work. I just thought it was so awesome. Mm-hmm. And I was just pretty much starting out with the type of drawing that I do now. At that time, I was like 15 years old or something, and I just thought it was incredible. So I just looked at it all the time and really absorbed a lot of style elements from her as well. because I think every artist has a phase where you are very like vulnerable to like becoming blown away by one particular artist or one particular style, and you end up absorbing a lot of that stuff and kind of imitating it, and it becomes like your role model art-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And that still shows today in my work. Like, I've sort of moved on in many ways, because I have a lot of different kinds of art that I like now too, but she was one of the main artists that really got me to start drawing the way that I do.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned lame earlier in the conversation. I have to say I'm lame because I had never heard of Black Cat until I started doing some reading on you and then realized that she was an influence. So I feel kind of lame. That's cool. And also, you as far as the French are concerned, and I'm assuming that Alphonse Mook, is he French or is he Italian?
No, he's actually Slavic. Czech, exactly. Czechoslovakian.
Okay.
Yeah, but he moved to Paris or something, didn't he?
He did. And he, in the late 1800s, that's when he started the whole Art Nouveau movement. Once he got to Paris and started doing posters for a lot of the opera productions there. But originally, he's from Czechoslovakia.
Yep.
It's funny you mentioned you said he was doing posters for opera. He was also doing beer posters because I had a beautiful poster in the basement for the longest, and I remember at the time me and Dwight will remember this. Me and a friend were trying to figure out what the poster was for. So we called a French restaurant, and this woman who was working there named Benedict, she said, "Well, it's just about beer. Why are you asking me about beer?" Anyway, it was funny for me because we were like, okay, I guess he was just trying to earn a living and just doing what he had to do. So
right.
Yeah, work was extremely commercial. But it's funny that you mentioned that poster because I have it hanging on the wall right next to me at this moment.
Oh, okay.
Right. Cool.
Very cool.
Well, we're gonna ask for the purposes of this conversation, you'll take a picture next to that poster so we can kind of encapsulate it.
Yeah. That'll be cool. Lois, now were you drawn to animation and illustration simultaneously? Because I would go out on a limb and say that do you more consider yourself an animator?
No, I have actually no idea what I should consider myself.
Okay.
I have like a lot of animation aspirations, but in my daily life, I illustrate more, so can't really decide.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I started always as an illustrator, just drawing a lot. Mm-hmm. And decided to study animation because I figured if I was going to study art, I had to choose something that would like get the maximum out of my drawing skills. So if I went and studied what I already did anyway on a daily basis, it wouldn't add enough to my skills. I needed to choose something that was like much more of a challenge and had like a wide variety of techniques to learn, and that's why I chose animation. So it's kind of like a coincidence.
Okay.
Well, not really a coincidence, but in the sense, like, I didn't always consider myself an animator. It was, like, purely, tactical decision. Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I'm being called. Oh, my grandma. I can cancel that one.
Don't cancel Grandma.
I actually calling. I'll call her back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
No, that's fine.
Little musical interlude there. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was. Well, as far as your illustration goes, do you have clients all over the world? Are most of your clients there in the Netherlands, in Holland, or in Europe, or how does that work out for you in terms of who approaches you for commission projects?
I have clients from all over the world, definitely, and I get a lot of offers from all over the world because most of my publicity comes from the internet. So basically, anybody can run into it. And I try to do the most work here in Holland just so that I can like develop a sort of network and a stronger network to build on when I get a project that's located. And also because like if I accept a lot of work from America, I got a lot of issues with the price because of the dollar-euro conversion.
Correct.
And plus I have the idea that artists work a lot cheaper in America than they do here in Holland. So I try to do as much as possible here, but I could, I mean, I don't accept all of the job offers that I get or commission offers, but they come from everywhere.
Okay. Now, I have to ask you, in terms of not accepting something, is it mostly because of things like price, or is it just the expectation in terms of, like, you being able to get it done schedule-wise, or what are some of the reasons why you would turn a job down if you had the ability, I guess, to do it?
At the moment, I've been unable to accept work because a lot of the offers are for smaller projects, and they usually ask if you have like time immediately, if you can work on something in the coming month, for example.
Okay.
And if you're already working on something, then you have to say no. You have to turn it down.
Okay.
That's maybe one of the reasons, because as a freelancer, you have to try and have schedule all these things next to each other, and sometimes you just don't have time for anything else. So it's often a time issue. And other issues are usually price issues. People who expect to not pay very much for the work, and as a freelancer, you have to turn down a lot of those things because people underestimate how much you actually have to do with the money that you get, how much you have to, you have to pay taxes over it and basically support yourself. So
right.
Okay.
They seem to think it's always about talent and not really about time for some reason.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's really being a freelancer is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes because people think that art is cheap sometimes. A lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. You seem like you mentioned that in your facts section. You mentioned about the idea of compensation and things like that, trying to have it be equitable to what it takes for you to create your work. And if you're doing commercial work, those are definitely things you have to think about. I guess aside from your personal projects, obviously you can spend as much time or as much time as you have available to try to make them happen. But if someone's paying you, if you spend 10 hours doing it, you make this much. Well, if you take that same amount and you spread it over 20 hours, and now you're making half the amount really.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question going back to the facts section on your site loish.net, and that's LOISH.net. You mentioned that getting educated and working in different countries makes it tough for you to give the same advice to young artists who approach you and say, hey, how do I do this or how do I make that happen? And you said pretty much that every place kind of has their own way of doing things. Can you give us who live outside of the Netherlands, can you give us the scoop on how things are done there and how that differs from other countries and other experiences that you're aware of?
What do you mean, work-wise or school-wise? Because a lot of questions are about school.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it mostly about school, but I was just curious, like you're talking about now, in terms of the conversion rate between the euro and other forms of money, and then also too, just in terms of expectation, just kind of how things just tend to differ from where you are versus the clients you deal with in other places.
Yeah, well, the money thing is an issue because I think in America they have very different. Obviously, the crisis has hit a lot harder in the U.S., so the budgets are smaller in general. Plus, the conversion to the euro is very difficult. So, as a European, as a Dutch person, it's very hard to work with an American client. And also, I recently had a certain experience with somebody who wanted me to make freelance work for an American, and he wanted me to work under a work for hire contract. Which I'd never heard of. It's a contract where, you guys probably know what that is. A contract where you give up your copyright almost immediately. Like all of the work that you make under that contract is copyrighted to the person who is hiring you.
Right. It's basically a time for dollars type situation. You do get screwed in that type of situation.
Yeah, and here in Europe, in Holland especially, it's very different, and that's a very cruel kind of contract that you just don't really find here. Here, as an artist, your copyrights are protected much more, and you often make the work and then sell the rights to the work in a separate contract, and with a separate amount of money. So you make the work under a certain budget, and then a certain percentage of that budget is required to buy also the rights. And that's very different. The climate for freelancers is a lot nicer and milder here in Holland. And also, the industry is just very different because there's no huge animation studios here. And in general, all of the art-related studios are small, and it's much easier to work as a freelancer and just be a more global artist. And in America, I think the job experience at different studios is very important. It's much more like large studio system with a stronger hierarchy. So a lot of artists like that ask me for advice on, how to handle everything and what job to choose. They have to realize that in America, it's just choosing a job as an artist has different meanings and means that you'll have a different kind of life than you have here in Holland.
I understand there too, and I've known artists from Holland before. I've had interactions with them before, And I was told that the whole idea and concept of how what American companies expect as far as doing testers for specific pieces of work doesn't really exist there. Like they here in America, there's a requirement that, and for some companies, for artists that don't have a real name or a real professional background behind them, that they want you to test on their particular job first, like a Spider-Man piece, for example. Is that true in Holland, that you don't have to really test that much for various aspects of, if you have a portfolio that shows you can do this type of animation or this type of illustration, do they still require that you do, an example of their character for that illustration?
I can't really say with 100% certainty because I haven't done I don't have that much job experience yet, especially in that world, which is probably the illustration and comic world. But I think that probably, if you have a strong portfolio here, and I think they're not very difficult about whether you're good enough.
Okay.
And the industry is just way smaller, and there are less artists, and definitely less extremely talented artists or technically very good artists. So if you're that far, you usually you don't get any difficult situations with work usually.
Okay.
But my job experience is quite limited because I've only been graduated since August of last year. So.
You're a veteran by some standards.
Right. So it doesn't make sense to ask you a question about your career highs and lows yet because, well, you're still experiencing those.
Right. If you guys are cool with it, I wanted to ask Lois some process stuff. Dee, I know you had a few questions you wanted to ask her, and I'm sure Adrian does as well. Okay. Strangely silent Adrian.
Oh, no, I'm good. Just taking it in.
Okay. Awesome.
But I wanted to ask about, Lois, your work is really colorful and daringly so in some cases to me. And I liked some of what you said somewhere about, and if I'm incorrect on this, you can correct me. But you talked about not using darker versions of the same color to create a shadow or depth on an object or a figure, and that you sometimes try to use a different color. And I'm sure that can get you some pretty exciting results. Do you sometimes have people who say, wow, your stuff is really colorful, or do you sometimes look at it and go back and forth about the color palette choices and things?
Yeah, well, I've been drawing very colorful artwork since I started out with digital art, which was in 2003 or something, and back then it was sort of insane. It was just every bright color that I could think of thrown together. So it's really to me, my current palette is quite muted compared to what I used to do. So I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, a lot of people say that the color is the main thing that they notice about my work, the way the colors, the brightness of the colors and the palettes. But to me, I don't know. I mean, that's usually my starting point for drawing. I usually have a certain color in mind or a certain combination, and I think, wow, that's really gonna work, and then I just start playing around with that. So, yeah, what can I say about it? It's my main. It's to me the most interesting part of the drawing process, the digital art process.
Now, let me ask you this as well, Lois. I read also on your facts section on the site that you do a lot of your coloring. You try to contain it all on one layer. Now, that's very interesting because a lot of, I won't say most artists, but a lot of artists do tend to have a stack of layers, and one layer would be devoted to, hey, here's all the stuff I want to do for the hair. Here's another layer for everything I want to do on the clothing. But I think that's really brave, to just do it all on one layer. How did you come to that point where that seemed to help your workflow?
Well, when I started out with digital painting a long time ago, I worked with tons of different layers because it's a very exciting concept. Yeah. And I would get stuck on artwork a lot and just have something wow, this is just not coming together. It just didn't have the unity that I was looking for, and the painted effect that I've always liked about a lot of digital art. I just couldn't get that in my work, especially not in Photoshop. And I thought that I would need Painter to do that, and then I got Painter, and it was kind of disappointing, So I was I was always looking for the way to create that unified the painted look. And the more, I've always drawn a lot, practically on a daily basis. And eventually I just reached a point where I just started working all in one layer because that was the only way to sort of bring it together, you know? It started as maybe sort of, I can remember that at some point I started merging the line art with the colors halfway through the process because the line art just didn't mix with the colors the way I wanted it to. And from that point on, I realized, like, it's not dangerous to put it all in one layer, you know? You can always paint over it anyway if you don't like where it's heading. And it's really, for me, it's nice to just let go also of that whole system because it just gets in the way of the painting process.
Now, that's interesting that you say that because I like that concept, especially the way that you explained it. It does approximate actual painting on a canvas or some type of surface, you know, as opposed to digital where people tend to expect to have that undo buttons. Oops, I messed up. I can just hit undo. I think, you know, kind of coloring or doing the art without a safety net is exciting, you know, and I think it shows in your work because your stuff is so vibrant, you know.
Oh, thanks. Well, I do need the undo button. That's like what's been keeping me from, because I do paint with acrylics from time to time, and I'm trying to get better at it, but the lack of the undo button in real life remains very difficult.
Well, let me ask. That's a very interesting thing that you mentioned, and bring it to Adrian and Lois. I was wondering if you thought maybe the fact that you do a lot of digital painting, does that inform your choices when you do your actual physical painting now? Like, because you don't have the Control Alt Z or Alt Z button to go back to undo what you did digitally or what you did physically, do you find now that you're capable of making better and more distinct choices because of your experience with digital?
Well, I don't paint that much in real life. Traditionally, I don't know how I should put it.
That in itself is actually a distinction. But go ahead.
Just painting traditionally, I don't do that very often. I'm trying to learn it because also it's just because I also just want to, you know, get a style going and maybe have exhibitions in the future, and it's just a smart choice. But now I've realized that because I've painted 100% digitally for so long, I'm sort of working backwards from the digital techniques back into real life. So basically I have something digital in mind and I try to make it happen with real paint. And it's kind of funny because sometimes that's just not possible, you know. A lot of my, because always towards the end of the like painting digitally, I always add a lot of effects or edit it a little bit with color balance or put a sort of feathered edge around it with, you know, a multiply layer, and that's just completely not possible with the painting process. So
Right.
find ways to make that work.
It's funny that you're talking about the bouncing back and forth between analog and digital, because I remember when I met there's a friend of ours named Jason Palmer. He's an artist that works out in California, and he does a lot of licensed stuff for movies and for studios. And he had some prints that we saw at a show, and he kept telling me, "Well, this is pencil." He says most of this is pencil. And I didn't realize it at the time what he meant, but he was just basically he's drawing it, he's scanning the pencils, and he's coloring over the top of it, and you could see the breaks in the line where the graphite and everything, you know, was coming apart, and it had a different look than obviously if he were, I guess, rendering the thing in with some kind of a more permanent looking line in I guess Photoshop, but it's cool. I look at some of your stuff, and now that you're talking about making more choices in terms of a muted palette now. When I go to your site and I see little things, I'm wondering, okay, is this an older piece? Is this a newer piece? You know, trying to figure out which ones are which. Because some of them I see and I'm like, wow, I don't remember that one before. But this one looks very different from what I saw 2 months ago when I first started trolling, you know, your website, so to speak.
Yeah. But the pencil thing is funny that you mentioned that because I used to make a lot of digital line art. I used to be very committed to that process because I thought it had a lot of added value, and it was always a huge pain in the butt. Like zooming in and drawing the lines and making sure that they weren't like shaky or whatever. And at some point I just gave it up and started drawing the sketch in Photoshop and then turning the sketch really light blue, printing it out, sometimes on more than one piece of paper, and drawing the lines with a mechanical pencil and then scanning that back in and coloring the rest in Photoshop.
Okay.
Because I thought the pencil lines were just more like fun to do, and it looked better, you know. It was much less, you know. The digital line can be so tough, and it's really hard to sort of keep a global view of how your line art is working out if you're zooming in so far to try and get the lines straight.
Yeah.
So I just gave that up completely and started doing, and now I don't do line art at all anymore. But if I do it, it's always with pencils.
Okay.
Much better.
Well, let me ask you this in regards to original art. Like you were mentioning, you used to do penciled line art and then scan it back in, and then manipulate it digitally. As far as you working digitally, do you miss having original art either for yourself or for an item to sell aftermarket? For people
Yeah.
who like actual physical art. What's your stance on that as a primarily digital artist?
Well, I think digital art is very useful and helpful to learn, and that it gives good results. But you really do miss having an original piece. It's definitely something that's kind of missing in the process, and something that I really want. Because if you develop your own style and have something that people are enthusiastic about, it has so much more added value to have like a real life version. It gives much more, yeah, just a sort of added value to the piece. And I
Mm,
notice a lot of the time that people ask me, if they could, like, especially here in Holland, people who are first discovering my work seem to think that they're paintings, that they're real paintings,
Mm.
yeah.
and want to like arrange an exhibition or something, and then I have to get the canvases printed somewhere and make sure that the quality is good and explain that it's digital. And sometimes I think it would actually be much better for me to just sort of move part of the process over to traditional tools. It's
Mhm.
Mm,
harder, but it's better. I've been doing this digital art thing for so long, and I really like to just maybe make like a series of small paintings or something, and
Mhm.
Hmm.
just see. It would probably give a lot of added value to my work. Also,
Mhm.
just it would probably help push the style in a better direction. I mean, I have that feeling. Just need to find some time to do it.
yeah.
Right, right. Lois, as far as style is concerned, I noticed that you posted I'm not exactly sure when you did, but you posted a 2010 demo reel on your blog, and I was noticing that the style in that one is slightly. It seems like it's a little more refined and slightly more angular than the 2009 one. Almost like you're kind of focusing yourself in a certain way. Is that accurate to say, or am I way off base?
Yeah, the demo reels. Yeah, I think my animation work has changed a bit because
Hmm.
when I first started, it was a lot rougher, and the new work is a lot like cleaner lines and more simple, I think.
Hmm.
But I took those demo reels to my agency where I'm at right now, which is called Shop Around, and they're in Amsterdam.
Hmm.
And the guy at my agency actually said that he really didn't like the new demo reel at all, and thought the old one was way better. So I don't know.
Wow.
Everyone has a different opinion about that.
Right.
I kind of liked it. I liked them both actually. Although I will say I like the music on the 2009 one better than I did on the 2010 one. But I think it was a hip hop song or something on the 2009 one. I can't remember now. Um,
Yeah.
Um, one last question as far as like style and maybe even process to some extent, but we blogged about you twice on our website. One was we posted a clip of your show reel,
Mhm.
or your demo reel rather, and then also just about some pieces in general, and we took a little clip of your bio and posted on there too. But one of the things that I said in the blog part that I wrote is that there seems to be like a recurring theme of fish and sea life
Yeah.
in a lot of the I don't know, probably the older pieces, I'm guessing, and I just wanted to ask you where that came from and what the if there's any meaning or reference behind it.
To be honest, there's not necessarily a point where I said, well, this has a certain meaning, so I'm going to use it a lot. It was sort of started decoratively, and I really liked just the feeling that it gave to the
Mhm.
work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because a lot of the time I combine sort of like I add a sort of underwatery setting to something that isn't necessarily underwater, and I really like the vibe that gives, and the sort of way that it creates like a mysterious atmosphere.
Hmm.
Sort of a lot what I do in Trichrome Blue as well,
Hmm.
and that's just it's a lot the feeling that I want to go for. It doesn't
Okay.
have a specific meaning. It's just it just always when I'm drawing a picture and I get that idea, I always think, wow, that would have the atmosphere that I'm really looking for.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. If you guys are cool with it, I wanted to ask some questions about the animation, if we could, of Lois.
Well, yeah. I mean, I definitely want to ask her some questions, especially about Trichrome Blue, and as to where overall gist of that the whole concept is. So that's cool.
Well, Lois, before we get into it, tell everybody in your own words what the Trichrome project is, because Dwight and I, and probably Adrian too, will all have to kind of confess to not knowing exactly what the pursuit of the project or the company is, and maybe you
Yeah.
can explain it.
Right now, the Trichrome project is something that I came up with. For my Emma project sounds kind of weird. My master's project at my school, which involved writing it. You had to start by writing a paper and then create a project around it. And I decided to write my paper about animated shorts in advertising. So that's like longer animations between 3 to 5 minutes long, which are used as an advertisement, as a long advertisement. And I wrote the paper and came to a lot of interesting conclusions about how animation is used in the advertising industry and what it means, like why it works. And a lot of that was like because animation creates a sort of fantasy universe and a lot of rich imagery and creates a sort of romantic imagery around what is simply a product. And the whole Trichrome project was created to sort of like take that to a new level and make, maybe you could call it a parody or a sort of extreme version of what companies do today with animation in their advertising practices, which is you create a concept and then you use animation to make it completely mysterious and make it seem as if the product can give you more than just like an extra material possession, but like a feeling and an emotion and an experience. I don't know if that made any sense.
Oh, it did. Yeah,
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems as if that was kind of what he may disagree, but it seems like it was kind of what they were trying to do with James Dean did that stuff for, I forget who it was for, but he did that thing and they animated it, and it kind of, like you said, it took a product and kind of gave it an artistic or a like you're saying a feeling, as opposed to just, I got to go buy the latest greatest whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. It created a sort of universe around the product, like a place where the product lived, and you wanted to go to that place, so you bought the product. And I thought that had a sort of creepy side to it as well, because that commercial is amazing, the one for Prada. But it's also just kind of freaky that like companies go that far and use emotions to manipulate people. And I thought that I wanted to sort of reflect that in Trichrome, just make it seem like a sort of creepy, like future dystopia company that can like actually sell emotions.
Right.
Which is something that you don't want to buy. It's something that you want to feel. It's something that belongs to you. You don't want to see it as a product. But I tried to create this brand that would sell it as a product.
Interesting.
Yeah. As far as Trichrome Blue is concerned, I think that was probably the first thing I'd ever seen as far as your work is concerned. But red and yellow, I'm assuming, are following behind it?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And can we get a date, Lois?
No. I have to see. I won an award at my school. It was the award for the most innovative graduation project of the year.
Oh, cool! Congratulations.
Thanks. It involved a bit of money, so I have that lying around for when I start on the project. So I basically have to finish the freelance work that I'm doing now, and then once I have time, I can start using that money as a sort of like starting budget for the project, for the coming two colors. So it's on its way. And it should be done probably before next year, but we'll see.
That's interesting, because I got a couple of questions involving that, because it seems to me if you're going in terms of what colors actually mean from a psychological basis, blue is very calming. So are we to assume that red and green are going to be something a little bit more aggressive?
Yeah, that was the point. Yeah, the blue was supposed to be very indeed calming and tranquilizing sort of, and red is seen as a color that represents passion but also anger, just a lot of very aggressive emotions. And yellow I took to mean it was all sort of made up, but based on sort of how colors are used in advertising.
Right.
And yellow I took it to mean happiness and freshness and like energy. So those should be that should be a theme that comes back in the animations.
That's going to be fascinating to see, definitely.
Yeah. Lois, I told you in the email I sent you, so my daughter was transfixed. I always show, whenever we post an animation, I always show it to her, and she was like, "Why is the girl underwater? How can she breathe?" And then she was like, "Why did she drop the thing into the ground and then the tree?" She had all these questions, and she was really curious, and it was really wonderful because it made her think, as opposed to just being kind of like wow or funny or whatever the case may be. It really made her stop and think, and I loved that.
Yeah, it's really funny that I also noticed by posting it online that almost everybody who sees it has a different interpretation of what it means, or like have different ideas about what's behind it, and I really like that. I just really like that people become sort of fascinated by just the idea behind it. But I think it's also because the music was pretty good that a lot of people like it.
Oh, the music was excellent. What's the fellow's name who did the sound design?
Marcel Janssen. He's a friend of mine. We went to Tanzania together for a school project, and ever since then we've been really good friends. And he was graduating at the same time as me, and he needed a project to graduate with because we can just choose whatever we want to make. We randomly didn't make up a project, so he decided to make the soundtrack for a number of animations.
Okay.
And he went for mine as well, and it just turned out really good. I was really happy.
He absolutely did. I have a musical background myself, and that was one of the things that I was really struck by. I mean, the choices he made were excellent. He seemed like you guys both seemed to be right in step in terms of what you were doing visually and what he was trying to do in terms of the ear. And I thought he really did an excellent job, creating more mood where there already was some. So.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us around to another subject, or to another animation that you did with the Mahaba love story. That was very interesting because it was kind of an odd thing. It's basically as a young guy he's spying on a girl who's getting some water.
Yeah.
And then he peeks in the girl in her window and breaks the bars in her window.
Yeah.
But then he still ends up marrying her.
Yeah, but the whole story was written by a bunch of students at the school in Tanzania that I was at.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We decided we basically, like, a group of students from my school in Utrecht all went to Tanzania, and we had different groups. So me and my boyfriend were teaching the animation group, and Marcel and another guy were teaching the music group.
Mm-hmm.
And because we were trying to teach the school new sort of multimedia techniques and ideas about new media and working with technology, we decided to do a project linking the music group with the animation group since they're so important to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the music group come up with a narrative and write a narrative musical score and decide what the story was, and then I would make the animation on top of it, which is sort of a big step for the music students because in Africa music is very like rhythmic, but it also doesn't change very much. Like there's not really a build up, and there's usually a story, but the story is in the lyrics, and the lyrics aren't always understood by everyone. So it was kind of like a big deal that they'd made a musical score that just changes at different moments and has different, just has a different story to it each time.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up with a story like completely, so it was just up to me to illustrate it.
Yeah, because I mean,
it's probably completely illogical to a lot of Westerners because at some point it's about a boy who's in love with a girl, but in Africa you can't just walk up to a girl and be like, hey, let's go have a drink or something. You're supposed to talk to her parents first. Right. So that's why he like spies on her and then decides he's in love with her. And then the girl is actually, she doesn't really have much of a choice in the whole matter. He goes up to her father, and if her father decides that it's a good plan, then he talks with the boy's father, and they all meet each other. And then finally, at the very end, the boy and the girl finally get to hold hands.
Right, which I can appreciate. The thing I found particularly funny, that was kind of the humorous element of it, was the fact that he broke her window. And you didn't see that getting repaired. You didn't know that if the father knew that it had been broken by him or what. And would he have even given his consent or approval if he knew he was basically a peeping Tom from the very beginning?
Yeah, exactly. And the breaking window part, I think, was meant by the African students as the moment where he was confronted with the fact that he had to make a decision on whether he actually liked her. Like, he couldn't just run around spying on her or something.
Right, right.
African humor is very different from Western humor.
That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. I have another question, Lois, and not to get into a big controversy, but like a lot of 3D animation, and I assume you would characterize most of what you do is like with Trichrome Blue and whatnot to be 2D, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of 3D animation to me, while it's fun and it's enjoyable, most of it looks a little weird and creepy to me. It's like that whole uncanny valley thing. And again, I'm not trying to be provocative, but I mean, we were watching Monsters and Aliens the other night, and I was like, this character just looks so ridiculously weird to me. And yet, many of the goals I would say for probably 2D and 3D are exactly the same: simply rendered characters, exaggerated action and anatomy, but in clear storytelling, and hopefully a story at the heart. But do you agree that some of it looks a little unsettling and I don't know. I don't understand why it has an appeal that it does sometimes.
Well, I don't really have that with the more cartoony stuff, with the Pixar style things.
Mm-hmm.
Monsters vs. Aliens is kind of Pixar imitation film, isn't it?
Right, kind of, yeah.
But there's also a lot of actually really freakishly realistic, like Polar Express and Beowulf type of stuff.
Oh.
That don't like. I mean, I can appreciate the
Right.
technological advances that are made each time with those films because they really are ways to just show off a certain technological advance in 3D. But it just doesn't really have much. Like you can't really get there. You can't make a realistic person usually. It falls slightly short, and then you end
Mhm.
up getting an extremely weird film, and you don't
Yes.
quite get the goal that you want. So,
Uh,
yeah. And as for the more cartoony stuff and the Pixar stuff, I'm generally just kind of sick of that style. It's not very
Mhm.
inspiring. Although I have to say that every Pixar film that I see always blows me away. So
Yes.
I
It
can't.
does. It
Yeah.
does.
I mean, every time I'm like, oh, it's another Pixar film. Ooh, big eyes, you know. And then I go see it, and I have to like, I usually cry in the cinema. It's just so freaking good, you know.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that Pixar does head and shoulders above their competitors or the other people who make those kinds of films is there is a story, there are real characters and there are real motivations going on. And one of the games I think that they don't play is they don't stunt cast star voices for the
Yeah,
sake of star voices. They try to go for
yeah,
someone who can give you, you know, who's good for the character as opposed to a name that they can bank on, so to speak.
Right.
yeah. And what I like about Pixar also is that they don't really like lower to the level of those that annoying humor that you have, like
Yeah.
you know the sort of pop culture references and things like that,
Mhm.
which are
mhm.
so overused ever since Shrek came out. And Pixar always tries to just like keep the humor within the context of the film, and
Mhm.
that's
Mm.
usually makes it very strong because you just get into the film and you stay in the film until the very end.
Right.
This
Although
is
they
true.
are very formulaic, I do sort of always have a thing against, you know, 'cause Pixar is also developing its formula now, and probably in 10 years they'll be the animation studio that, you know, I mean, they are very good, but eventually people are going to get sick of that formula, and will they be able to like lift out of it, or will they, like Disney, you know, stay convinced that that's the one way to make films, and sort
Mm.
of trap themselves in a, you know, in a moment where they can't come up with new creativity.
Right.
Right.
I think it's going to be interesting now, especially with the fact that Disney's acquired Marvel Comics, is going to be how they powwow and I guess work together with the people from the new House of Ideas, and
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
and
okay.
yeah, you didn't see the air quotes then, did you? And and as to whether or not they actually it helps move their own older IPs along in a new direction.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, because Disney is very well known for being stuck in that one formula. You know, that isn't, you know, it's still entertaining, but it's just old by now.
Hmm.
Right, right. I agree with you there. You mentioned in other interviews, Lois, that you're working on a secret project, an animation project that you're putting together yourself. Now, is that Trichrome, or is that something else, or is that something you can tell us about now? Or
That's probably just Trichrome.
okay, all right. I wasn't
Sorry.
sure, so I
I wish
was
I had something amazing, but I don't really yet.
okay. Okay. Well, my last question was going to be about DeviantArt because you mentioned them earlier and being a part of that community. But how did you first become a part of the DeviantArt community? And obviously you see it as being important as far as like an online home or a clubhouse, you know, for artists to kind of mingle and to show ideas and so forth.
First doing DeviantArt in 2003, I think, really long
Hmm.
ago, and just because a lot of other people were doing it, so I have sort of an addiction to signing up to community websites of all kinds. So
Okay.
recently, I had to just go around and delete a bunch of accounts because I don't have time to keep up with them all anymore.
Okay.
But DeviantArt is always the one that I stuck around with because you get there, you just have groups of people that come back to your work and leave interesting comments, and also people whose art you end up following, you know, and you always find a sort of little niche there
Hmm.
of people that are very fun to talk to, and you look forward to showing your work to them. And after a while, my work became more and more popular on DeviantArt, and it's a source of lots of publicity. That's very important to me.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed about DeviantArt too is really cool is that they don't just group like things together. Like at the bottom of the page or on the side, they'll have like a photography interest as well as a painting interest as well as a macrame interest for lack of a better and then some computer generated art right
Yeah,
next to it. You get a chance to see all these things that are happening right there in front of you, and you can
yeah,
kind of you don't necessarily know what it is when you see it, but if you click on it, you might find your own bit of interest in it.
yeah,
So it's
exactly.
kind of good to kind of cross pollinate that way.
Yeah,
I,
definitely.
Adrian, anything you wanted to add? Or?
Oh no, I think I'm good.
Okay. Lois, I have to ask you a couple of quick questions, if I may. As far as pronunciations goes, because you helped us with hint, and I'm still not doing it right. But you were clarifying on the pronunciation of your last name. Give it to us again, please, if you would.
Yeah, it's pronounced Van Baarle.
Van Baarle.
Yeah,
Okay.
Van Baarle. Yeah.
Van Baarle. Okay. All right. We'll try not to mess it up too bad, but we do want to beg your patience now.
Yeah, well, as long as you don't say Van Baarle or Van Barrel, because I've been called that a lot in my life, and it's not Van Barrel.
Okay. We'll probably get as close as we can. But that's cool. But I guess before we wrap it up with you, we do want to let everybody know again. Your website is loish.net, and that's loish.net. And I highly recommend anyone who hasn't gone to your site or gone to your DeviantArt page to do so and to drink up as much of your work as they can, because their thirst will be satisfied.
Thank you.
We really think you're terrific, and it's not often that the three of us are in agreement that somebody's pretty awesome, but you definitely are.
That concludes this episode of Sidebar Forever, hosted by Dwight Clark, Swain Hunt, and Adrian Johnson. You can find us online at sidebarforever.com. Any emails or questions can be directed to us at sidebarforever@gmail.com. And also, subscribe to us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Sidebar Forever is copyright 2020. Dwight Clark, Swain Hunt, and Adrian Johnson.